32 years ago when I moved here, none of my friends would come and visit me because they said it was too dangerous. The neighborhood was built up, the houses were redone, the houses are beautiful, they're all Victorian houses. A lot of money was put into the houses, a lot of money was put into the neighborhood. Now our friends won't come and visit us because they can't find any place to park.
A thoroughfare going down the alley, so they're going to cut that off. They've done no traffic study, so that's going to affect the neighborhood. They're putting in 200 apartments. I mean, this hasn't been approved yet, but
the plan.
It's just absurd.
In 2016, local development company Kaufman Development proposed a 10-story building at the site of the IBEW building on 2nd Avenue in Victorian Village. In order to move forward, Kaufman needed to get approval from the Victorian Village Historic Commission. The resulting 2 years of back and forth displayed the competing interests of developers, commissioners, and residents, as well as demonstrating just how far apart their visions for Columbus are.
This is Victorian Village, a beautiful old Columbus neighborhood where no matter where you look, you'll find gorgeous turn-of-the-century architecture. The area became a thriving suburbs in the 1870s, and despite being very close to the urban Short North neighborhood, it still retains that suburban feeling. Many residents want to keep that historic integrity and the residential vibe, and through their historic commission, they have a way to do that.
Great.
Well, and it's no one of us, it's all of us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Historic commissions are one of the only ways for residents to weigh in on new developments around them. These commissions have a lot of power and dictate what gets developed in a neighborhood through zoning variances, which are when developers are given permission to build more than what the city code allows.
We are constantly giving zoning variances to a lot of contributing properties in the neighborhood because conventional suburban zoning got applied to our neighborhood so long ago. And we have to do that in order to approve projects that are historically appropriate based on the standards that we have in city code. The idea is that by designating it a historic neighborhood, you're going to be protecting a lot of this city's history and some historic architecture.
However, very few people in Columbus enjoy this luxury, and there is little consistency to how old a neighborhood has to be. Instead, it relies more on a, quote, high level of integrity, which favors neighborhoods that have historically been wealthier and whiter. King Lincoln, for instance, is one of Columbus's oldest areas, but doesn't have historic protection. Only Italian Village, German Village, Brewery District, and Victorian Village have a commission, and even then, the residents' power is limited to voicing their opinion at meetings.
The city code isn't prescriptive, so generally what becomes controversial, especially lately, is height. And so the city code doesn't say no buildings over 4 stories, 5 stories, whatever the height is. It says that the new construction needs to be compatible with the nearby historic structures.
At its core, this conflict is a disagreement on the interpretation of city code. The city code tells historic commissions to preserve, protect, and enhance the neighborhood, a purposefully vague sentiment. Because of the ambiguity of the law, what preserving, protecting, and enhancing looks like in practice is open to interpretation and hotly debated.
The ordinance says that new construction, which the Kaufman project is new construction, must not overwhelm buildings that surround it. We have the average building around it is anywhere between 40 and 60 feet high. And you propose to build a building that's 180 feet. You're overwhelming it.
I've been on the commission for 16 years, and I would say that's the most pushback I've ever seen from the residents.
At the meeting last month, the Victorian Village Commission meeting, we had 20 speakers. 20 people showed up. Normally we get 2. 20 people showed up. Every single person was against it.
If you try to think about what it would be like to be in a house alongside this building, I don't see how you could seriously think that you were preserving, protecting, and enhancing that house, right? So.
Most residents focused on the height and the density of the new project, claiming that the historical and residential nature of Victorian Village would not be preserved, while also opening the door to increased commercial development.
It is so much taller and more massive than any of the structures around it that it basically insults what's there in the neighborhood.
And the huge increase in density,
I think it's just way too dense.
and it's going to make a difference on traffic.
On the other end, Kaufman argued that the project was a great way to enhance the neighborhood by creating jobs and encouraging growth. They were originally optimistic about meeting the area's demands for size, but struggled to keep up with the requests of the commission and the residents.
You're trying to oftentimes kind of extrapolate what everybody's saying in hopes that you can come up with something that moves you forward towards an approval.
We come in, we get feedback. We go spend weeks doing design, spend a bunch of money, come back in. The direction changes just a little bit.
So you're getting a lot of feedback. You're getting feedback from the neighborhood. You're getting feedback from individual commissioners.
Go back, spend another month, come back in, tweak it just a little bit.
And many times in order to go in for a meeting, you have only a matter of a week or 2 weeks to actually modify your plan.
We're trying to get consensus from folks on the commission and neighbors, although they may not agree with everything, to try to figure out how to make the project work.
Over the course of 2 years, tension between the two sides started boiling over as intense meetings took a toll on the residents and Kaufman.
It looks like all the other buildings between 4 and 6 stories are turning a profit. Why should this one be the exception?
This is higher than what you got approved for.
At this point, I'm at my wit's end.
Because there's something about this developer that just doesn't understand no.
Take a model, take the X-Acto knife, scrape off what you don't like so that we can get it approved.
It's just definitely not appropriate for the neighborhood.
This is just wrong.
Just say no.
Send it to the brewery district. Can I ask the audience to please be quiet, please?
After all the meetings and heated discussions, the commission split the vote to approve the project in their July 2018 meeting.
While what's been submitted is responsive to that feedback, it's not entirely in alignment with that feedback.
I think that we've all been kind of pushing and pulling on this thing to try to make something work. Unfortunately, I still feel it's just too tall.
I would say that they were earnestly making changes, but for me as one commissioner, it just wasn't meeting the standard.
Kaufman is now trying to sell the property. This may seem like a win for the residents, but the final decision was much closer than it appears. The last commission vote was tied 3-3, showing just how far apart residents, developers, and city leaders are on how Columbus can protect its character while developing for the future.